Tonight, we're going to obviously be talking about the proposed restoration of the athletic fields behind Scituate High School. Quick agenda for tonight, we'll do some introductions, then we'll get into how we got to this point. Talk a little bit about previous athletic field studies, existing field conditions, and tell you about the design history of the project in front of us and what will be in front of town meeting on Monday night. Then we'll get into where are we now, talk about the design, how we got to the proposed design, tell you a little bit about the design, and show you some sections that we cut through the site to give you an idea of the topographic changes. Then we'll touch on some of the hot button topics that have been out there, one being solar orientation, and I assume everyone wants to get the synthetic turf overview. We all know that Scituate has a number of things that we're looking into and a number of needs. There's the senior center, there's our ongoing water challenges, there's the need for ongoing repairs to seawalls, and then a few other items that don't have pictures or buttons here, but obviously the elementary school study that was just released a few months ago, and the need for sewer in North Scituate. So there's a lot of needs out there, but this is definitely one of them. Back in the early 2000s, excuse me, before we get to that, this came to the forefront, the need to improve our athletic facilities in town. And I say our because I am a Scituate. I have two young kids that play in the programs here. And in 2015, the Recreation Department established a subcommittee which looked at the fields in town. Looked at the demand, the growing demand or declining demand, how all the fields are used, the conditions of the fields. And they came to a conclusion that Scituate has a field deficit, a regulation field deficit of 16.67 fields. The big challenge in Scituate is we don't have the space to keep building new fields to meet the increasing demand. We've been fortunate enough over the past several years that CPC has bought land within the town, somewhat 400 acres about?
More than
400 acres of land in the town is dedicated to conservation. Great thing. But our young kids and the overall community need athletic field space in town, and we need quality athletic field space in town. The current demand is beating the heck out of our fields, and it can't continue to withstand the amount of use that we're placing on them. Natural grass just will not survive the amount of use. Natural grass has a finite amount of hours that it can absorb over the course of a year, and we are well above that in terms of use. So, let's talk a little bit about the existing challenges that we're facing with our existing fields. First and foremost, Title IX. Title IX is a gender equity statute. It isn't right and it's not legal for the women's softball team at the high school to have to travel 1.4 miles from the high school to Central Fields to practice and play their games. And this needs to be addressed. The boys baseball team has to walk out the back door of the gymnasium at the high school, and their facility is right there. The girls have to travel, again, 1.4 miles to get to their facility. There's no restroom facilities there. There's no place for them to change. Transportation is typically student athletes that have their license driving each other down to the field. So that is one of the big items that will be addressed in the proposed design. Secondly, our track facility is non-regulation. We haven't had a formal track meet at the high school in a year and a half, Bill?
A year. We have one. We try to have one for the fact that we have senior night there, but it's difficult and we have issues with the officials.
So one of the big challenges with our existing track is there's a 2-foot elevation change from one end of the track to the other. It was constructed in the wrong way when it was originally built 20 plus years ago. Secondly, the surfacing on the track is well beyond its useful limit. As you'll notice from the images, there's a lot of spider cracking, there's potholes in the surfacing, and it's just not at a point where it's safe to hold any kind of meat, even if it's a non-regulation meat out there. The synthetic turf within the track is also beyond its useful limit. You can see in the lower left-hand image, that's actually, the white is actually one of the numbers on the football field, where UV degradation has taken its toll on the synthetic turf fibers, and they've worn away to leave about a half an inch of a reveal between the white fibers and the adjacent green fibers. The image on the upper left-hand corner shows where the fibers are broken off. That's also from UV degradation. You can see in the image on the right an area at the lacrosse crease that has been repaired in recent years. I don't want to get into the fact about the firmness of the field because that's probably another issue. With all the talk in the news about concussion and impact-related issues, this field is hard. And if we were to go out there and test it, we might run into some challenges. Code issues with seating in the press box. I'm surprised that no one's fallen through the bleachers and been seriously hurt. The decking on the bleachers is not completely closed as it should be. The guardrails on the sides are not appropriate. There's not enough aisleways for proper egress of the existing bleacher system. There's too many issues to explain with the existing bleachers. If you sat at them for any kind of sporting event, football game, you probably know what I'm talking about. The entire site has accessibility challenges. So people with mobility needs can't get to everything on site. They can't get to the press box. They can't get to the visitor bleachers. Even the quote-unquote handicap parking right outside the ticket booth for the track and field is not within ADA compliance. It's too steep. You walk in the ticket booth, that slope is above ADA regulations. It's too steep. You can't get to the bleachers at baseball if you're in a wheelchair. You can't get into the ticket booth building because the grades are inappropriate. So all those items will be resolved in the proposed design. We've met with the Accessibility Commission and they unanimously approved the design of the project. And finally, the unsafe condition of natural grass surfaces in town. We're all aware of water restrictions in town, the inability to properly irrigate our natural grass fields, and there's no if, and, or buts about it. Natural grass fields require a ton of water to maintain them. So the proposed design is calling for roughly 285,000 square feet of turf. If that was natural grass, we'd be looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 23 to 35,000 gallons of water need to be applied to those fields every week during the summer. High demand. As part of the 2016 study, they did a survey of all youth organizations, not even including high school youth, and looked at the amount of demand on all of our fields in town, not just the fields out behind the high school, but every single one of them, Flannery, Central Fields, etc. All the fields are being dramatically overused. And natural grass is a living thing, and when you're playing on it that often, it has no opportunity to grow, survive, thrive. And with the amount of children and community participating in various athletic organizations in town, we don't have an opportunity to rest any of the fields. And that is something that a natural grass field needs. So with the proposed design being synthetic turf, we're creating 3 fields, or actually 2 additional synthetic turf fields that will serve as a workhorse for the town and allow us to refocus some of our cultural maintenance practices on the other natural grass fields in town. Limited resources for proper cultural maintenance. DPW does what they can with what they're given. But largely, maintenance is limited to mowing. There is some weed control, there is some fertilizing. For proper cultural maintenance on athletic fields, it includes a lot more aggressive practices like aeration, top dressing, overseeding, resodding areas in extreme high use areas like goal mouse and in between the hash marks of football. Again, even if we allocated that kind of money for those type of cultural maintenance program practices, the use would be throwing good money at a bad thing. The use would just turn the fields back into grass. And then finally, inconsistent surfaces and grades. All the fields in town, I don't know if you have children or if you played on them yourself, the grades are all over the place. My two boys play in town soccer, travel soccer, lacrosse, other sports, and visiting communities dread coming here. It's not my opinion, it's a fact. The grades on our fields are dangerous. It's a liability. The baseball field at the high school, a lot of time is put into the maintenance of that field. But there's a 3-foot elevation change in the last 60 feet of center field. So you get out to center field and you walk, if you're a fielder and you're going back towards the fence to catch a fly ball, you're running uphill. The softball, or excuse me, JV, the current JV field and overlying practice football field is an uphill. So in other fields in town, such as Flannery, Central, they're in a very similar condition. So design history, I just showed this slide to let you know that many people have been hard at work on this project. These meetings only go back to the first time that I was retained, or my firm was retained to start looking at this project back in August of 2018. But the meetings on the left really focus on the design meetings that we've had with the working group and with other organizations in town, such as middle school PTO, Scituate Youth Cross, Scituate Football, etc. The meetings on the right are all the public meetings and presentations that we've had to date. So the first one was on November 11th, and since November 11th, there have been 20, I believe, public meetings with ample opportunity for the community to give input on this project. So where are we now? When we started the project, we obviously got the entire site topographically surveyed. We had all the wetlands delineated by a wetland scientist. And then we looked at the existing opportunities and constraints on the site. We looked at solar orientation. We looked at wind direction, circulation patterns, existing structures. We looked at slopes, whether they're steep, shallow slopes, drainage patterns, etc. What that led us to, through a number of design iterations, led us to the proposed design for the site. And I'll talk quickly about it. I won't get into the nitty-gritty details. But basically we're looking at a complete renovation of the track and field facility. We'll address the 2-foot elevation change. It'll be a new 400-meter track, 6-lane oval with an 8-lane straight this time. The previous track was 6-lane oval, 6-lane straight. The 8-lane straight gives Scituate High School the opportunity to have dual meets with other communities. The D areas, which is the D-shaped area between the turn of the track and the field, will now be all resilient surface with track surfacing. It allows for the high jump, long triple jump. Discus will get thrown out of the lower right-hand corner out onto the synthetic turf field. The turf field will be completely renovated, and we will have underneath the field, the entire base will be renovated with an extensive stormwater management system. So we're not negatively impacting the adjacent wetlands. The baseball field will be reoriented in a north-northeast orientation, and it will be expanded in size to support multi-purpose uses, including soccer, lacrosse, and field hockey. Moving over to the western portion of the site, softball. So softball will be brought back onto the high school, adjacent to the high school where it properly belongs. Will be oriented in a south-southwest orientation, which is north-northeast is ideal. South-southwest is the next best orientation. It's the exact opposite of north-northeast. That field will also be expanded for multi-purpose use to accommodate football, girls lacrosse, and field hockey. All three facilities will be lit with state-of-the-art LED energy-efficient sports lighting systems. The existing sports lighting system for baseball, which was generously donated by the Reedy Family Foundation, I believe 6 to 7 years ago, will be relocated to the natural grass field in the back of the site. The existing ropes course, which is kind of the brown blob at the bottom, will be maintained. That is a critical element to the high schools and middle schools physical education program, but we will be fencing it off. So no more having to worry about your kids running around and climbing up on those things while you're trying to watch a game and potentially breaking your arm when they fall off. We'll also be removing all the grass in that area and putting in playground wood chips. It's a maintenance nightmare having to mow around all those guy wires and utility poles and all that kind of stuff. We'll be adding some handicap parking to the site. We'll be adding a concessions and restroom building down where the current concession building is in the track and field facility, in this location here. There'll be concessions on one side and then a men's and women's room on the other side. The men's room will have 3 fixtures and the women's room will have 3 fixtures. Up on the northern end of the track, there's another structure for storage, roughly 600 square feet of storage. All new grandstand seating with a press box and a handicap lift to get people with accessibility and mobility needs up and down. When we construct these fields, it needs to be constructed over a stable base that's free draining. So we need to remove all the topsoil in that area. We're going to be generating a good amount of topsoil. And in an effort to save money and do the right thing, we're using as much topsoil as we possibly can on the site in the form of landscape berms in between these facilities to give each individual facility their own unique feel and intimate setting. So on the western side of the softball field, we'll have a landscape berm that is about 10 feet in elevation. In between the softball and baseball field is a berm that will start roughly at the grade of the parking lot and grow to about 9 feet of height in the back. And then there'll be some berms out front, again, to provide a little bit more intimacy and also to stop people who park in the parking lot at night to watch a game from shining their headlights onto the field and cause disruption. There's a walking trail all the way around the facility. The walking trail measures out at just under a half a mile. Everything will be vegetated with a combination of deciduous and evergreen trees. And then there'll be smaller, lower level plantings around the main entrances and team areas. So that's a brief overview of the site layout. Here are some sections that we cut through. So the section on the top takes a look at the track and field on the left. You can see the bleachers faded out in the back. Still maintaining that slope up to the baseball field. And then obviously the synthetic turf baseball field with a walkway along one of the sides. Section on the bottom takes a look at cutting through that slope and berm to the west of baseball. So you'll be able to meander if you're out just for walking or jogging on that circulation walkway. You'll have trees and undulating topography around you. And I think it's a nice feature that the entire community will be able to use. Section on the top here takes a look at the slope from the walkway on the hill going up to Cushing School, looking back down onto the baseball multi-purpose field. All those slopes are graded out at 3-to-1, so easily mowable and comfortable to sit on, informal spectator seating, if you will, and will provide great sight lines down to the field. And then the section on the bottom is a cut through in one of the areas of that finger, that landscape finger that extends down between softball and baseball. So this project has currently been estimated at $10.2 million. Gary Myerson from CPC, at the end of the presentation, if there's any questions regarding funding, he's happy to address those. So we'll get into some of the hot topics that have been out there. Solar orientation is the first one, and specifically talking about baseball. So, northeast or just northeast is the design recommendation, no matter what level of baseball you're looking at, no matter what design manual you're looking at, they all state if you can lay out a baseball field in a northeast orientation, you're doing the right thing. LOB Rule 1.04 states that. NCAA Rule 2.14 states the same thing. The last quote is from a design manual for baseball and softball fields. The American Sports Builders Association also states the same. So in our design, we consciously lay this field out to be the best possible orientation for all times of year, all right? I think one of the questions that came up regarding orientation of baseball relates specifically to this time of year. Early spring, you got the setting sun coming over in this area, and pop flies, there is solar glare on a clear day for first and second base and the right field. And it's for a limited amount of time. Every day that passes, the sun obviously gets higher in the sky this time of year, and it sets further and further to the west. So as the season goes on, the solar condition improves for baseball. The other thing to think about is the number one priority for solar orientation is the batter. The batter, the catcher, and the umpire. At no time will the orientation of this field, will the batter have the sun in their eyes. No time during the day, no time during the year. And that's one of the main reasons why it's oriented this way. For, let's say, a Legion baseball game or an adult league baseball game on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, solar orientation will not be an issue. Just to show some comparable sites, Braintree High School, Cohasset High School, Cole Cassidy, Hanover High School, Hingham High School, all oriented in the same general direction. Just also for reference, in town, some of our premier youth baseball fields, being Greenbush and Roach, oriented in the same direction as our proposed orientation. Old Gates, the field for the old high school, is oriented in the same direction. If we take it a step further, Fenway Park, same orientation. Harvard University, UMass Boston, which is also BCI, same orientation. And then beyond, I give a list of Cape Cod baseball league fields that are in the same orientation, a boatload of universities and local high schools. And these are just the tip of the iceberg, all right? I mean, we could have spent days digging up other schools with similar orientations. Baseball is a sport that's played outdoors, and there's always going to be some solar impact, depending on the day. But it's our professional opinion that these fields are laid out properly and per design standards for all levels of baseball. Same thing goes with softball. Softball is in the absolute opposite direction. If you can't do northeast, you do south-southwest, and that's what we've done. So solar orientation there should be fine as well. All right, let's get into it. So, recommended turf system. So all 3 fields will be, according to our plan, will be infill synthetic turf. Synthetic turf is really comprised of a few components. One is the back, which is at the bottom of the image. That's typically a geotextile fabric that has a urethane coating on the back to hold the fibers in. The fibers are polyethylene, and they get tufted into the backing much like a house carpet, and then the urethane locks them in. Depending on the manufacturer, they either scrape away some of the urethane to allow drainage through that geotextile fabric, or they actually perforate holes in the bottom of the carpet to allow water to drain through it. Every drop of water that hits the surface of these fields moves directly through the system down into our engineered drainage system. They're designed to drain at a rate of over 10 inches an hour. So if these fields flood, we're building ours. We're not trying to play baseball. The fibers on this field, we've specified a dual fiber system. You'll notice on the right is a slit film fiber, kind of looks like a bag of grapes. The bag around grapes. It's fibrillated in a diamond shape. And the fibers on the left are monofilament fibers. So monofilament fibers are extruded individually. So they come out as one long strand and then they get cut down. Slip film fibers kind of look like this, and then when they put the infill into the field, it gets groomed and it breaks the fibers apart and gives it the natural grass appearance. The reason why we went with this system is you get the best of both worlds. Monofilament fibers are great for aesthetics and they're great for ball roll. Slip film fibers are great for durability and they're great for infill control. So I know you've watched games on TV where someone drags their foot on the sideline, or they get tackled and you see a little splash of rubber and sand. These slip film fibers help to control that infill splash. The infill that we're proposing as part of the base bid for the project is sand and crumb rubber. It'll be about 50-50 by weight. So sand initially gets installed on the bottom to give it some ballast, and then they go very thin layers. Crumb rubber, sand, and then over time they intermingle and it becomes a nice mixture of the two materials. I'm not on social media, but people I know are. And I've heard a lot of talk and concern about crumb rubber. And obviously anytime you bring up cancer, it's a very emotional subject because I doubt there's anyone in this room that hasn't had their life affected in one way or another by this terrible disease. I am a father of 2 kids that are going to play out here. I would never even consider this if there was a concern over it. So let's get into it a little bit. It all started back in 2009. The University of Washington, the assistant women's soccer coach, had a goalkeeper get diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And she was like, I think it might have something to do with the crumb rubber in the synthetic turf fields that we're playing. She did a little bit more digging and she realized that a couple of other goalkeepers that routinely played on these fields also came down with cancer. So that's when it really started going. It got picked up by a couple of NBC outlets and it went national. There's been a boatload of studies and research on the subject. To date, there's somewhere in the ballpark of 100 scientific, published, peer-reviewed studies and reports that say there's no elevated risk of playing on these fields when compared to natural grass fields. Same amount of risk for human health, whether it's cancer or any other kind of health-related issue. On the other hand, guess how many scientific, published, peer-reviewed reports are that say there is an elevated risk?
None.
0. All right, so, where there's smoke, maybe there's fire. There's absolutely no smoke. There's a number of international reports. We've listed some of the main ones. The Dutch National Institute, the European Chemical Agency. We listed some from the United States. Massachusetts Bureau of Environmental Health. Connecticut Department of Health. So Connecticut has had a citizen's petition to put a moratorium on the use of crumb rubber in fields. Citizen's petition. This doesn't stand a chance because it doesn't have science backing it up that there's any issue here. Even the Washington State, where all this started, Washington State Department of Health has, and Washington State University's researchers that looked into it, they find no connection. There's no link, no linkage. In the United States, there's over 12,000 synthetic turf fields. 98% of them are crumb rubber and sand. Locally, here's a list of just a few research institutions that have sand and crumb rubber fields. Amherst, Boston College, Boston University, Harvard University, and MIT. MIT makes me test every spoonful of topsoil that we take off their campus or bring on. And they have no issues with crumb rubber. Northeastern University, Tufts University, and then more locally, Stonehill College, Bridgewater, Eaton. So we talked about, chemicals of potential concern and scientific studies finding that there's no link with human health issues. Marie Ruderman graciously came here tonight, and I'm sorry I didn't introduce you originally. Marie is with EnviroRisk. She's a senior risk assessor and toxicologist that has been looking into synthetic turf fields and specifically crumb rubber for a number of years now. And she'll be available to address your questions, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of them afterwards. But she put it pretty simply to me. The chemicals of potential concern within the crumb rubber particle are bound to the particle. They're not bioavailable. When I say bioavailable, they're not available. Those chemicals of potential concern cannot get into your system through dermal contact, through inhalation, or through ingestion. All right? But for a moment, let's say they are. Okay? So if we take that crumb rubber particle, and the only way to release those chemicals of potential concern is to use an industrial solvent, acid. Many, many times more corrosive than human sweat or even stomach acid to pull those materials out. All right? We pour a bunch of acid on it, pull the materials out. We got a jug full of chemicals of potential concern right here. We take the husk of the crumb rubber and we put it over here. If you took 100 milligrams, did the eyedropper in and took 100 milligrams of those chemicals 3 times a week from the age of 1 to the age of 30, no elevated health risk. To put it even more simply, let's think about some of the things we do on a daily basis that are much more detrimental to our health. How many of us in here have had a steak on the grill? Think about the PAHs. are being put into your body from a growth stick. Marie has a whole boatload. She was telling me the other day that she's been thinking about starting a website. What to worry about, what not to worry about, and what to worry about. Just another couple things on synthetic turf. I don't have any slides for them. I did hear that there were a number of posts about watering of the synthetic turf fields. You do not water synthetic turf fields. That would be one of the most ridiculous uses of water I know. Some people say that you water them to reduce the temperature. No. These fields do have elevated temperatures, but recent advancements in the turf fibers have helped that and have brought down the heat. If you were to water them, say on a 90-degree day in August, the only thing you're doing is bringing the temperature down for a period of 5 to 10 minutes. And then it would be back at what it was before with increased humidity. You just don't water them. My firm has designed, over 300 of these fields all over North America. 2 clients water their fields. One of them being the New England Patriots. Well, it's Gillette Stadium, but it's New England Revolution. And they water the field before the game and at halftime for performance reasons. The other one was Boston College, an alumni stadium. And the only reason why they watered their field was for aesthetic purposes. When these fields are new, there can be a little bit of static electricity that's generated between the infill and the fibers. The infill can climb up the fiber a little bit, and in between the hash marks of football, it can look a little black. Over time, the infill settles in, and that doesn't happen anymore. They watered their fields to reduce the static electricity, so they didn't look bad on ABC on Saturday afternoon. What else? Lead. I've heard lead. These fields are designed and tested to be under 100 parts per million for lead. The same standard as the Consumer Product Safety Commission for children's toys. Lead is not a concern. These fields are recyclable. So the existing field within the track, as part of our design documents, that will be removed, cut into pieces, rolled up, and then shipped out for complete recycling. And it won't be turned back into another field, but it'll be turned into other products. Recycled lumber being one of them. Leaching. Are we going to hurt our groundwater? The answer to that is no. If you look at, I did a project for the Fenn School in Concord back in 2011. They had some contentious neighbors. When we were going through conservation, the field was designed in a riverfront area. A lot of ecology happening over there, protected turtles being one of them. Neighbors were concerned that the field was going to leach heavy metals into the Concord River. We were successful at every level of conservation. It got appealed all the way up to an adjudicatory hearing with Mass DEP. I was deposed by lawyers. It was crazy. One of the outcomes, I think, the field was built with crumb rubber. I think one of the positive things that came out of that whole experience was water monitoring wells were required to be installed at the outfalls of the field to test water on a quarterly basis to make sure that there were no elevated levels of heavy metals that were being introduced into the Concord River or into the groundwater system. Since then, Marie, do you know if they've completely stopped?
They've stopped monitoring now
Yeah.
because the concentrations are at
Yeah. So
non-detectable.
non-detectable levels of heavy metals making their way through these systems.
They did collect samples quarterly for 5 years.
And then the owner petitioned to have it reduced, and they said absolutely. So, just, we're a professional, my firm are professional design consultants. We're independent design consultants. We design just as many natural grass fields as we do synthetic turf. I am not pushing synthetic turf. We are proponents for this project because it's the right thing to do for the town of Scituate in terms of their current use needs, the demand needs. We need a workhorse. We need something to make a difference going forward with the athletic fields in town. With that, unless anyone has some comments, I'm happy to open it up to some questions, answers, and discussion. So your hand first.
Okay, hi. This ranges across a couple of things. A few years ago, when the lights were installed, I think you properly said that we call them the Reedy lights because they were a donation.
Yeah.
We had a meeting of abutters for people who live on Buttermilk and Judy and Arbor Way and all those places because right now there's light, even before those lights, there was some light pollution, and particularly games going on at night, we were concerned about even more light pollution. So could you address what's going to happen now that you're building a berm and you're going uphill?
Yep.
How will we make that less of an intrusion to those neighborhoods?
So all the proposed lighting systems with the softball, baseball, and track and field facility are LED light structures. They are so much more efficient in their use and control of light. It's like an umbrella of light that shines down on the surface of the field compared to the lights that are out there now, which are lower, and they actually have to shoot and project light all the way across the field. So the conditions should be much better. We've also done some lighting scans for the proposed design to make sure that the real hot areas are all focused within the facility and on the playing fields. And then once you get off of the playing fields, it drops down to low levels, low foot candle levels within approximately 50 to 100 feet.
Okay. So continuing on that, sorry, piggybacking. Oddly enough, even though that meeting was a lot about the impact on abutters that would have to do with light, what most people recognized as a more important problem to them was sound.
Okay.
In that you can live a half mile to a mile away from the school and have a blow-by-blow description of every play. So is there a way, now that we're looking at better technology in terms of how to site it and everything else, of making it so that people who live in the area all around the school don't need to listen to every minute of every game?
Are you talking about like PA address?
Yep.
Okay. So right now, the PA speakers are on the press box and they're projecting out towards the neighborhood.
Yes.
The proposed design has brought in a new public address system for the fields that will be a sound box that's mounted underneath the scoreboard. The scoreboard is actually going to change location. The scoreboard will now be located at the northern end of the track. It's going to be located up here, so it'll be projecting sound this way. More so than that, it'll be projecting sound this way, this direction, because the speakers are adjustable within the sound box. So that's something that, after construction, we'll have to do our best to tweak those to the best of our ability, but it should be much better.
Okay. So along those same lines, I appreciate that you've done a lot for the sports that we've addressed here today, but for instance, cross country is one of the teams that participates in this area. So they leave the high school, they go up the hill running to the north, then they go through neighborhoods and come back. And you were mentioning berms and soil movement. Are you now making it so that cross country has to run up a steeper slope?
No, it's a handicap accessible slope, so you're only going up 1 foot and 20. But I'll turn it over to Bill. Bill can comment more. He's had multiple conversations with cross country.
So I've talked to Kathleen McCarthy about this, and we are going to include the trails into the coaching route, just so for the fact that we can have fans spread out around the area and basically cheer on the runners. But we are working on, obviously there'll be a different course that this is going to be included into it.
What is the life expectancy of this turf field?
Good question. So they're warranted for 8 years.
Warranty for what?
8 years.
Okay.
They're warranted for 8 years, non-prorated. All right, I think I heard a comment or saw a comment that they're prorated. That's not true. We do not allow that. Non-prorated for 8-year warranty. Life expectancy that I think the town should expect is anywhere between 10 to 12 years. We've had multiple clients get much more than that. The city of Lynn, for example, we did a field for them, Manning Field. That is approaching 16 years now. City of Waltham, all their fields up at the former Army Corps site off of Forest Avenue, they're approaching 16 years on their fields. You know, if the fields are groomed properly, they can last.
Okay, grooming, who takes care of that?
DPW.
Okay.
And let me amend that. So our contract documents have also included 2 annual visits. So whoever is the turf manufacturer and installer for the project, they are required to come back 2 times a year over the 8 years of the warranty to do a deep cleaning and grooming of the field. You wouldn't believe the amount of bobby pins, thumbtacks, not thumbtacks, that's exactly. An earring once, like a diamond earring, but they'll come and do a deep cleaning of the surface and grooming. The main purpose of that is if for some reason we have an issue with the field and we need to make a warranty claim in year 6, the turf manufacturer can't turn back to Moore and Dale and say, you guys haven't been maintaining your field properly, you know, so we're not honoring this warranty claim, because they're actually doing it.
Okay.
So that's one of the things. Second item is, at closeout of the project, we require that the turf manufacturer provide a full day of maintenance training for all personnel that will be working on the field.
Is there specific equipment that we already own that can maintain these fields? Or is that a separate purchase?
That's a separate purchase. Well, they may have some equipment now, but the current $10.2 million has that equipment in it. And basically, it's pretty simple equipment. It's a drag behind to get the fibers that are starting to lay over to stand back up. The minute they start laying over like that, you're creating more friction between the sole of a student-athlete shoe or a community member shoe and the fiber, and it just causes it to wear faster. So you want to keep them standing up as much as possible. Secondly, to just kind of get a soft distribution of the infill on top. And then the other thing is just kind of a leaf sweeper. So there will be leaf debris that falls on the surface of the field, and that's just used to clean that up.
I have one more question. It's totally on my way to the restrooms,
Yes,
are they connected to the concession stand?
they are not.
Is it possible to make them individual bathrooms, gender neutral, seeing as though our state has new laws in place?
At this point, no.
Thinking
Yeah.
forward, what
Yeah.
could happen rather than have gender specific?
At this point, no. Unless we wanted to make, no. At this point, no. It's a modular pre-engineered building, so it's being delivered and basically on trailers, 2 of them, getting craned over, dropped onto a slab, and utilities connected. And I would say, yes, we could make both of them gender neutral. However, I'm not really sure how that works,
Yeah.
because there's
I'm
3
just
fixtures
thinking
in
of, like,
each, and there's some
individual,
urinals
like,
as opposed to
Individual
toilets.
doors
Yeah.
rather than one or two
No,
bathrooms?
because they're all handicap accessible
Okay,
um,
I'm just thinking.
at this point now.
Thank you.
Yes?
After this project is completed, two questions. After the project is completed, what will the field deficit then be?
Great.
And then also, what is the town doing to make sure that we have funds available in the future to maintain and upkeep all the great work that will have been done?
Great question. So, let me start, what was the first one?
The first one was, what is the field deficit going to be
Oh, thank you.
after these projects are complete?
All right, so synthetic turf, when you add a synthetic turf field to your overall facility, you're not gaining one field, but you're gaining three. All right, so, and that's just because of increased programmability. You know, I called it a workhorse earlier, it's because you could just pound hours into these fields instead of distributing all the hours over all the natural grass fields. So, like a natural grass field, you can expect to get 400 uses on it a year, if every use is considered 2 hours, so about 800 hours of use. Here, you know, assuming proper maintenance and everything, and really it's not that much maintenance, you can expect 3 times that. So the deficit will be going from 16.67, I think the number was, down to, what, 14 now. So there's still a deficit. However, this is going to be a dramatic impact in what the town is able to do. In terms of investing dollars into maintenance here, the maintenance requirements for these fields are drastically reduced. I'm not going to blow smoke and say that there's no maintenance because that's a fallacy. These fields do need to be maintained, but the maintenance is dramatically lower than what the natural grass fields are out there. So Maura, do you want to talk about a little bit how, you know, what the ongoing plan is? I think really we've had multiple discussions about it, and it's really giving rec and schools the opportunity to start resting some of the other facilities. So year by year or every few years, you can take a facility offline, renovate it with proper cultural maintenance program practices. Maybe not even renovate it. Maybe it's just aeration and seeding to let it bring life back into the field by programming stuff on the synthetic turf field.
So what Mark doesn't know, I probably don't need that. So what Mark doesn't know is I've already been in contact with the company just to have the grass fields looked at once this is accomplished. Because that is something that I've been hearing, what about the maintenance of the fields, the maintenance of the fields? And I'm hearing it, and I am addressing it. So I'm in contact with the company right now to take an individual field that you don't even have to take offline, that you can work on, and at the same time have people still play on it, not as much maybe, and manage it better, which will help with the turf fields being in use. Say, for example, the field behind my office over at the old Gates building. We could take that field and work on it and still let people play on it. And it would, you know, it does have a cost to it, but the cost that we have from the user groups could sufficiently pay for that. And then they would teach our DPW how to maintain it. And I see what you're saying, what we're doing now maybe isn't working anymore, so now it's going to change. So every field in our town the one behind where I am in the office is much different than Flannery Field because of the soil content. They will teach each individual field on what has to be maintained. So I am in contact with them, I'm starting to plan for the future, so yes, I do forward think on that. So, thank you for asking.
Just so you understand, they've been working on the baseball field. All spring sports started about approximately 2 weeks ago. Baseball hasn't even been on the field yet. They've been hitting fungo out in the outfield, haven't been able to get on the diamond. If you look outside, it was beautiful this afternoon. Couldn't play our first game today. so that's been postponed. So as you can see, I'm sure they're frustrated, but I was at an AD's meeting today, and all the Plymouths are playing their games, Hanson playing their games. Most of the schools, in fact, almost all the schools in the Patriot League were playing their games today. We're the only schools that had postponed.
Bottom line is, there'll still be a deficit in fields in Scituate, even after the trial.
Well, one reason for that, I think, is because we do not have land to build. We looked into how much land we have, and we just don't have land owned by the town to build.
Yeah.
We wish we did.
Yeah. Thank you.
So you definitely acknowledge the heavy current use of these fields, and I'm wondering what's the project duration to do this work, and what time of year would that be done, and how would that impact the current use, like as the project is being completed? We have, again, for those teams, et cetera, who utilize these fields while the project's being done.
Yeah, I can speak to the projected schedule, and then I'll let Bill speak to his plan. So if everything goes smoothly, and we are approved at town meeting, bids come in and they're within budget, and it's an acceptable, qualified, experienced contractor, we will break ground July 1st of this summer. The goal is to have the eastern portion of the site being the track and field facility with bleachers, restrooms, all that kind of stuff, open for Thanksgiving football against English. The baseball and softball portion of the complex, multi-purpose portion of the complex will follow that. And our current bid, what contractors are bidding on, they need to deliver that, I think, the middle of April 2020. So it's a longer period of time. However, multiple contractors that are bidding on the project have called and asked us, well, what if we get done sooner? As long as it's done right, I think you're going to have a bunch of happy people, you know. So I think the plan is that they're going, right now, all the contractors are looking at, instead of just focusing on the track and field, going in and having at it starting July 1st.
So they're all kind of offline simultaneously?
Correct. And hopefully what that results in is a project that's delivered to the town a lot quicker than originally estimated.
So when it comes to the sports at the high school, it's obviously going to depend upon how they're going to attack the whole construction. If they're going from both ways, and we're not going to have any of the fields at the high school, I'll be working with the rec department on using gates, you know, Cushing, and all the fields that we have currently. Hopefully on the 9th, I'll be contacting Cohasset and Norwell to work out possible game schedules for football and possibly some other sports, but I would like to have our home games in soccer and possibly games in Central and all that, but hopefully we'll be working on that on the 9th.
Yes?
Can I reverse for a minute back to Maura's comment? I'm intrigued by the idea about DPW being trained to help with ongoing maintenance of this, because clearly that's a very important component.
Right.
Can you give us a rough idea, when we're talking about additional hours, I don't know, let's say monthly, are we talking about needing a new DPW employee?
Not necessarily, because I think I'd be hiring out to another company, a private company. They would then come in and train our DPW. They would really work on the field, bring it back to life, bring it back to like a beautiful field, and then they'd say, okay, this is what you need to do to maintain this. And then our DPW would know what to do.
But how much time would that take?
Well, we don't have to shut down the field, as they told me. You don't have to shut it down completely, but he told me it would take about a year to rejuvenate most fields.
I meant more from a personnel point of view in terms of if you have a finite number of people currently working for DPW who in many cases, in my knowledge, often work 30 to 40 hour continuous days because of other responsibilities, does this add maybe an hour a week, or are we talking about 3 hours a day?
Well, I think it's a different maintenance plan than what they have now. I think every field, like I said, are individual, so one field won't take as long as something else. They have different maintenance plans. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't gotten in depth with them, Martha. I wish I had more information to tell you. I just started this because I know that I should be. I'm trying to forward think and do the right thing on that. So I can get back to you on that. I don't have every single detail of that, but I am starting to forward think that, yes.
I'm just picturing in terms of the price tag, when we're discussing money,
Right.
we're talking about, 99% here, and again, awesome that they come back twice a year and work on it, but if we then are committing ourselves to 10 hours a week of our payroll time from a DPW employee, where would that money come from?
Are you,
I don't know how much they spend on it.
Are you asking about the synthetic field? Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, this new complex, what would it add to our overall budget? Yeah.
So the new complex is going to be dramatically lower.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and in actuality, like all the other fields that Maura is talking about, and the maintenance associated with those fields, will actually be able to be increased because less time is having to be spent out here.
Super, that answers it, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi. I'm just wondering, in terms of your study that went on in Concord,
Yes.
about leaching,
Yep.
you mentioned heavy metals, but
Yep.
I'm just wondering if there are any other chemicals like BPA's or flame retardants that might be in this rubber, and was that tested?
They analyzed for VOCs, SVOCs, volatile organic compounds, semi-volatile organic compounds, which include like phthalates and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, and they also tested for metals. They didn't find VOCs at all. They did have some low levels of PAHs initially when the field was first installed, but they, within 2 years, were at non-detectable levels. And all of the concentrations of PAHs that they did find were much less than the aquatic receptor standards, the ambient water quality standards. They also tested for metals for the full 5 years. The only elevated concentrations were zinc, which is actually kind of typical. You'll see some zinc leaching out of these fields because of rubber is made with like 50% zinc, and there's a huge amount of zinc in rubber. But the concentrations of zinc that leached out of the fields for the whole time were less than ambient water quality standards.
And so you might want to post that on social media, like your studies and everything, because people are really starting to talk about it. Environmental types people are concerned.
And that's something that, we went through the whole conservation process and planning process. That information was provided to the planning department when they were doing all of our stormwater review as well.
All right, but I have one more question. You didn't mention javelin. I'm just wondering. if
Javelin
there's
in the same
area.
spot as it is right now,
Oh,
at the
okay.
backfield.
So it's not going to change?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
If it does change, it would go up to Cushing, but that's doubtful.
On the east side of the football field, with that dotted line, is that the walking path?
Oh, the yellow, the white lines?
Yeah, the two dotted white lines look like a road going instead of...
No, these white lines are this is the wetland, an isolated wetland with their associated buffers. The walking path actually wraps around.
Okay, so that line's the wetlands, the dotted white line?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a question for you or if it's for a town meeting. Unfortunately, if this doesn't go through, does the town have a plan to be compliant with Title IX?
This is our plan to address Title IX right now.
And if it doesn't go through?
We have to figure something out.
Have to.
Exactly.
softball player.
Yes.
I'm one of the Facebook people that have angered a lot of people. I think I was dubbed last week as Negative Nina. My grandchildren call me Nina. You've done a wonderful presentation here. I'm really impressed, and you've certainly made me feel better. All of that said, I hate plastic. I am much more of an environmentalist as far as putting things in our ground, and I am still concerned. I have read a lot of the studies that were done, starting with the ones in Washington, and studies that went all the way up to 2016. And I have also read recommendations from our Massachusetts government, the national EPA and national health organizations. And they have all said that the studies are not conclusive. Not that they have absolutely eliminated the fact that there are no dangers, but that the studies were in small pockets and that they were not conclusive. The studies are continuing to go on, and they have not got the full picture. And just recently, within this last year, there have been several other studies that have found microplastics and rubber particles in fish that had actually even gotten into fish flesh and along the shores, especially in the Carolina areas where they've been doing a lot of studies. I have a granddaughter who lives in Hawaii and is studying environmental science and has been on 2 programs out in the ocean working on all of this. And for me, one of the quotes that was put in a study that just came out this week and was on the national news this morning said, keeping our ground in a natural state is really the only way to go. That whatever we put in our earth will eventually wind up in our food and our water. And I have seen enough to the whale that just came out of the ocean with 80 pounds of plastic in his stomach or whatever.
That's not from a turf.
I know a lot of that has to do, well, the studies in Charleston are saying that yes, it does have to do with birth. It's pieces of rubber and plastic. Tires are not allowed to be buried. It's against the law nationally. The only reason crumb rubber can be tired is because they're not considered tires anymore. They have been broken up and crushed into pieces of shredded rubber. But it's basically the same thing that is in that rubber that caused the tires not to be buried. So I still have concerns about that, and I think that this design is absolutely fabulous. I realize that natural grass is a lot more maintenance. From what I'm studying from other areas across the country, organic grass does not, the organic turf does not require the same amount of maintenance that the regular grass does.
It requires a heck of a lot more.
According to the studies that I've read, it requires less.
Not
But you do,
but that's fine.
have weeds in it. You
Yep.
will get clover and things like that.
And that's extremely detrimental for athletic field uses, because when clover, crabgrass, other weeds that once they enter into an athletic field and then they die off over the summer, then you have bare patches. Those bare patches affect ball roll, those bare patches turn to mud and create unstable and inconsistent things.
Are you talking about, I think she's talking about organic synthetic turf, right?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were
Not
talking.
talking about,
No, I thought you were talking about
No, I'm talking
natural
about
field
organic.
uses.
I'm talking about organic grass, not synthetic.
oh.
There is an organic synthetic that
There's organic
I don't
options,
know
yes.
much about that. I have not read
There's organic options for infill on synthetic turf, and in fact, we are carrying an organic option for infill as part of an alternate to the project.
Anything that we could do on that part would certainly would make me feel better. And I just feel that here we just passed a plastic bag ban in Scituate last fall, and now we're talking about putting plastic rug on.
It is a playing surface, but As a former athlete and a person that designs athletic fields, in an ideal situation, of course, every field is going to be natural grass. We are so far beyond being in an ideal situation in Scituate that this is really the only solution that is going to help us start to get ahead of the game. I understand the concern about, taking natural grass and turning it to plastic. It is by far the most durable product that we can utilize in this situation. And we're approaching it from a standpoint where when it reaches the end of its useful life, we're recycling it. So it's not being landfilled. We talk about tires. Tires are not a hazardous material designated by the EPA, correct, Marie? I understand the concerns associated with it, but I think we talked about that a lot earlier. I can't speak to aquatic life. I don't know if you, Marie, have any?
Well, I mean, the design of the field is such that you're trying to keep the rubber on the field.
Yeah, so around the edges of the field, we have a 12-inch wide concrete nailer that actually goes up about I'd say a quarter of an inch above the surface of the field. And that does help keep some of the particles into the field. Again, I'm not going to look in your face and lie and say that no particles will ever leave the field, because we've all seen our kids' socks. And,
I was going to say, I can show you my lint filter.
Yeah. So it does happen. And it will happen more at the beginning, right after installation, until that infill starts to settle in, and then it'll be dramatically reduced. The reason why it's happening so often now is because, unfortunately, the field at the high school should have been replaced 2 to 3 years ago. It's that far beyond.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
An ignorant question. Does water soak into a turf field?
Soak in?
Does soak, like when it rains?
It goes right through.
It goes right through?
Yep.
Okay. Then I don't need to ask that.
Unrelated. It's yours related.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if you could tell us more about the organic, going along those lines, the organic alternative.
Yeah, okay.
Because in the very first planning meeting, I asked the guy there, and he said it was actually at the superior surface.
First planning meeting.
The one before you were involved.
Oh.
Anyway, sorry, but he was very positively, he said it's a great,
Yeah, I think it's a nice product.
coconut derived, is that right?
So there's a number of different options out there. There's coconut husk, like kind of ground up coconut husk. There's a combination of coconut and cork. And then more recently, there's a wood infill option. The wood infill option intrigues me. It's brand new, but it really intrigues me because it's sustainably harvested from the United States. It's, I won't call it sawdust, but they're tiny particles of wood that have been buffed, and so it's not splinters or anything. Boatloads of testing has been performed on it. It does actually hold a little bit of moisture, so it can provide some evapotranspiration cooling on the surface of the field. Same thing with the cork and coconut. The challenges with organics is, one, they're a lot more expensive.
Well, the guy that I talked to said it wasn't that much more expensive. I mean, if you consider that, if one person gets cancer from this, potentially, you consider the cost of that,
No.
which is like $1 million,
I think,
medical.
one,
I'm saying,
if I think there was a risk for one person getting cancer, I wouldn't even consider crumb rubber.
really, because what she was saying is the studies are inconclusive in a lot of cases.
She's Googling studies.
Everything can use more research,
Actually,
but-
if you look at the EPA website, if you go to the EPA website, there's actually a spreadsheet that shows all of the studies that EPA is looking at right now. There's about 90 studies on that spreadsheet. And if you look down, there are most of those studies will say there's no significant risk. And they say it over and over again, or there's no correlation with using synthetic turf fields and cancer. And if you look through, you know, the way she said it was that, you know, there's not enough studies. There's lots of studies out there. EPA is filling in some data gaps. So, you know, there's all different ways of looking at the potential toxicity, right? And that's what they're doing now, is they're kind of filling in those data gaps. They actually came out with a statement, I think it was in 2015, indicating that they did not feel that there was a significant health risk associated with synthetic turf fields and that they were safe for use. And scientists pointed out, well, there's this data gap and there's that data gap. So they went through this analysis in 2016 of what are our data gaps. And actually, if you go onto the EPA website, they list out, you know, where they're, you know, looking for more information. But if you look at their spreadsheet with all the information that's out there, it really, you know, kind of hits home over and over again. There's really no significant risk associated with playing on these turf fields.
I mean, I go back to the risk assessment that you did, Maria, where we're really looking at the worst case scenario where you can't get the chemicals of potential concern out of the rubber because they're chemically bound. Assume you can. And you ingest it 100 milligrams 3 times a week over 30 years and there's no risk.
Yeah, you said that, but what I'm saying is, it would be nice to know what the extra cost is of having organic.
Oh yeah, we're getting it. We're getting it. Yeah, that's all part of it.
Thank you.
And
That's all I wanted to know.
oh yeah, and if the project can support
Because
it,
there might be a large component of people in town that would prefer not to risk anything, you know, like take no risk, and do something that's great for the earth rather than something that is questionable. So.
questionable as in,
environmentally speaking, you know, putting a bunch of rubber on top of our fields rather than, you know, like if we had the option of putting something else that, you know.
I mean,
like
it also takes millions of tires out of the landfill systems
Okay.
and creates another use for them. I mean, chrome rubber is being used in so many different aspects in our world right now that people probably aren't even aware of. Timberland shoes are making soles out of chrome rubber from tire. There's flooring in hospitals that use chrome rubber from tire. So, you know, I agree that organics are worth looking into, and we are. They're part of the project as an alternate. The challenge with organics is they're more expensive, maybe not by a large margin, but the thing with organics, you have to put in a concussion pad underneath the field. And that's where your price really goes up. So, you know, we've estimated that the pad, which is alternate number 1, if the project comes in under budget and we can, and we have the money to pick up alternate number 1, we'll pick up a completely recyclable polypropylene cradle-to-cradle recyclable pad that's been engineered for athlete use. Then alternate number 2 is the organics, whether it's the coconut and cork, or wood, depending on the manufacturer. And yes, they do have some advantages. I think that in addition to the cost, there's a deferred maintenance cost associated with some of those. And I've tried to address them in our specification package. Those coconut fibers break down over time, and the infill depth reduces, which leaves the fiber of the turf starting to more easily lay over. So they have to come back basically every other year and add more material. What I've done, or we've done, sorry Sean, in the specification was require that the turf vendor, if we do decide to go with the organics, that their price needs to include coming back on an as-needed basis to top dress with additional material so we don't get too low. Follow me? Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me, the existing football field is synthetic turf, and that's been there 15 years. Is that crumb rubber?
That is
It's
crumb
built?
rubber. Yep.
So in the last 15 years with a crumb rubber field, how many illnesses or cancers have been reported in Scituate by the players using that field?
I wouldn't.
I mean, I'd ask school and...
Less than one. Less than one.
I am head
Dr. Meharry's. Yeah.
With regards to field orientation,
Yes.
specifically the baseball field, I know that's been a more recent thing that's popped up. And some people, I think, are using it as a negative against the plan to say, well, people are complaining about the field orientation. I guess this isn't a question, more of just a statement or a comment. Mark's been phenomenal. He's come out to the field, taken a look at the time of day that's a potential issue. And I just want to say that we, as a high school baseball program, we're in favor of the plan and the current orientation. No matter where you have the field facing, sun will be an issue at some point of the day. And the way it's oriented now is not the same as it currently is, but it is a minimal issue.
Yeah, change is difficult for some. But thank you.
Block the sun from everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as Bill mentioned, next year, hopefully at this time, you won't have to cancel your first home game. You'll be home.
Great.
And winning.
First week of practice.
In your estimation, and pun intended, ballpark figure, if those were grass fields, what would, to properly maintain them, you said it's going to be astronomical, what do you, again, estimate that would be for maintenance cost? 100,000, 200,000 per field, per year?
Yeah, it's a good question, Andrew, but no matter what level of maintenance, with the amount of use we have in town, you could have Fenway Park's field staff, and we wouldn't be able to keep up with it.
Right.
It's just a fact. I mean, it's a natural, it's a living plant. And if, 6 hours a day, someone's standing on it, it's not going to live. And that's what we need. We need these facilities, again, to be the workhorses, so our other natural grass fields can be properly rehabilitated.
Our current fields there, isn't there a reason why they're at that state? Because we don't have enough water to maintain them? Could that be a factor on the current condition of these fields here that we're talking about? And the fact that we built one in Cushing and we're not able to.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big restrictive challenges in town is water. Yeah, and as I mentioned early in the presentation, if all three of these fields were natural grass, that's roughly 285,000 square feet of natural grass. I say that, or it's basically industry standard, that you want to irrigate an athletic field between 1 to 1.5 inches of rain per week, or irrigation per week, either one. If we have a wet week, it rains every day, great. You don't have to irrigate. But like we often do in the summer, and we have dry spells, you're looking at anywhere between 23 to 35,000 gallons of water to properly irrigate these fields. That doesn't even include growing. So growing, once the field is constructed, and we're trying to either grow natural grass from seed or sod, it requires a lot more water. And when we're going through periods of drought and extreme heat, like we've seen over the past few summers, the field has to be syringed, not irrigated for growth, but syringed so the grass doesn't burn.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
One comment, one question. The comment is thank you, your team, and all the committees in Scituate that have brought it to this point. I understand how hard it is to get a project not only started, but through the process. So congratulations to everyone for their hard work, and hopefully the town sees the value in the project. That said, can you talk a little bit about how it is going to get funded? Because I think that's another boogeyman.
Gary's been waiting all night.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know me, I'm Gary Myerson, I'm the chairman of the CPC. I also started on this project with Dan Fennelly, about 6 years ago, Dan? So we were on the original committee to analyze the field data from all the groups. The total budgeted project cost, and it's important to realize it's just a budget, is about $10.25 million. There's another $420,000 that the town voted in to pay for engineering, architecture, and project management, surveying. So the total project is about $10.75 million. $400 is already paid for. Okay, so we've already invested the $400. The funding will be roughly $1.6 million from the town to cover all the things that CPC cannot cover. And that's any turf-related items, anything that's removable, and a few other statutory things like the visitor stands we can't put in. Okay, that's a pretty complicated reason why we can't, but we just can't. CPC has just over $4 million currently in undesignated cash, so it's free cash. We also know we'll have at least $1.25 million coming in revenue. Okay, at least that much. So that's $5 1/4? Okay. And then we're going to borrow another just over $3 million. And we will have no problem covering that over 3 to 5 years. CPC generates over $1.25 million in free cash every year. On top of that, the last I saw, which was today, Scituate with its AA rating is getting sub 2% funding for 5 years. So if you think about it that way, less inflation, you're borrowing at negative rates. So it's an opportune time to do this project. If I had my choice, I'd actually borrow the whole thing.
Well, I was going to say, why not borrow more?
Well, we have the cash, and what happens is
You can't invest.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, but, you know, the town meeting is generally against borrowing, right? I'm from one who would borrow. I would take it all the way to 30 years, but you can't, okay? I think the prudent thing to do is CPC always, I just ran the numbers the other day, over the last 10 years, we average just over $3 million in unused cash every year. It's just underutilized, all right? We've done, over the years, I'm not just talking about the current CPC, all the CPC boards have done a great job managing cash, really kind of putting it aside almost for one big project, right? And we knew this one was coming a few years ago. I think Scituate hasn't borrowed via CPC, and I think it's a good way to start would be just to dip our toe in anyway. For me, it's no problem, but, you know, if I was sitting there, but I think as a town, we have to get comfortable doing it. And just for some other numbers, over 90 towns have used borrowing for CPC. I think they've borrowed up to, as of 2018, $340 million. So it's quite a bit of money that's being borrowed via CPC, so it's very common to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Price.
Will this current funding mechanism allow for additional projects that might come down the road in a year or two who might apply for CPC funding? Will there be money available? I don't know. You know, not talking millions of dollars, but
Yes. So okay. So when we did the analysis, we stressed out CPC. We just didn't say, oh, we have this money. Statutorily, we have to put aside 30%. 10% for historic projects, 10% for open space, and 10% for, affordable housing, sorry. On top of that, we generally set aside between 2.5 and 5 for admin, just, you know, admin purposes. When we stressed it out even more, we set aside another 10% for just other projects, okay? Even with that, conservatively, not including the state match, not including interest income, we reckon we could pay back the bond in 3 to 4 years, okay? If you add the state match, that could be, you know, this year was 20%. Generally, it's about 15, all right? So that's even more money that we'll have put aside. Sure.
I just have a question, it's not necessarily related to that, but when was the last time the fields were actually redone?
All right, which fields?
Any of the fields?
So CPC paid for, am I pointing the right way? Yes. CPC paid for the girls softball field, well, the softball field actually, the seniors use it, everyone uses it. We paid for the one over here by the library. We had actually originally had money for the one we call the Tower Field, all right, but that it's on the docket to rescind because that field effectively would be moving over part of this plan. If you remember, CPC also had originally I think almost $750,000 put aside for a softball field at the high school that the plan got wiped out by the middle school, okay? So that got rescinded as well. So in a way, you can use that as part of the funding for this project. That went into the balance. So Cushing was the other one that was recently done, right? But unfortunately, they wouldn't let us water it. So, and that's why you're here, all right? Everyone wants grass, but we don't have the water for grass. This is what we have. Yes?
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. It has been reassuring. You mentioned about the deep cleaning twice a year. Is there other recommendations in terms of routine cleaning from a hygienic standpoint? Other recommendations for turf?
Yeah, hygienic standpoint, no need to use any kind of antibacterial spray, anything like that. Multiple studies out there. The turf system itself is not a conducive habitat for bacterial growth. Dr. Andrew McNitt from Penn State did a whole study on that, determined that it's not conducive for bacterial growth. He tested a number of fields, none of them had staph or anything like that. I think the issues with staph, just like with a natural grass field, you're going to get raspberries from time to time. Now, the coefficient of friction on the surfaces isn't nearly what it was with the old AstroTurf fields and stuff like that. But where people are contracting staph, it's typically they'll get a raspberry on the leg or their elbow, and they'll go back into the school to take a shower, and they'll use a towel that's been sitting there for 3 months. No need for any kind of treatment in terms of that. Really, it's just grooming the field. Like for field hockey, where they're taking their penalties and they're hitting the infill out, it's just moving the infill back into place. Same thing with batters boxes. Even shortstop, on a baseball or a softball field, from, Pee-wee baseball and softball all the way up. These are just conditioned when they step in the box. First thing they do is that. You don't need to do it, but they do it. At shortstop, they're going like this in between pitches. That moves the infill around a little bit. It just needs to get brushed back in. That's really all we need to do in terms of maintenance. I think the annual maintenance, they come in with a machine that basically sucks the top layer of infill up into the machine, gets the dust out of there and stuff like that, just so that, just gives you, rejuvenates it a little bit. Andrew?
Yeah. So going back to the funding a bit, so what percentage of CPC's budget is going to be for debt servicing?
It depends on how long we carry the debt, basically. So if it's a series of 2 or 3 one-year bands that we use, it'll be a very small percentage. It'll just be really interest, to be honest with you. A ban is a bond anticipation, though. It's basically a 1 year, very short period. I'm anticipating right now that that's what they're planning on doing. I mean, I would prefer to do 5%. The debt service, I only look at it as an interest point of view. I don't look at it from the principal, because the principal is cash that you would normally do. Like I said, right now it's running at the 5-year, Scituate 5-year was trading today at 177. So it's going to be negligible in terms of the percentage of our, I didn't even bother calculating it, it's so low. All right. The other thing is, I failed to mention, as I see the youth center sitting out here, one of the funding mechanisms we have is the youth groups. Even though it's relatively small to the project, it's huge to each youth group. 3 of them have committed to $10,000 each, which, as you know, for a nonprofit youth group is a huge amount of money. And I have to really thank them all for that generosity. Sorry, does that answer? Do you have another question?
No.
Okay.
Just on behalf of the project team too, I'd like to thank CPC for all the work they've put in on this. It's been a tremendous amount of work over the past few months. So Gary, Dan, Susan,
Karen,
Karen, yep, thank you very much.
Hi, thanks so much for this presentation. It was very informative, and I think everything is wonderful. I was wondering if you could tell us how we could share the meeting with people. It looks like it's being filmed with people that weren't here, so more people can get the information.
That's Seth.
Okay.
Sure, yeah, no, we'll have it on YouTube, on Scituate Community Television.
On YouTube?
Yes,
Great.
yes.
And when will that go up?
Tomorrow.
Oh, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
First of all, I wanted to thank you very much for coming and giving the presentation. I've been doing quite a bit of following the Facebook Renovation, and not only to my liking, but I do appreciate various opinions. I keep coming back to, there's been a lot of questions asked about maintenance. And in the back of my mind, it seems like that actually is a really important part of it. Even though you say that it's a sort of something that you only have to visit a certain, maybe a short number of times per year. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you think actually happened to our existing turf fields. Was it just a matter of number of years or improper maintenance? I think it's important to understand that because I want to see these fields last as long as possible, and I think that there definitely has to be either some sort of professional element. I know you said we can rely on the DPW if we need to in the plan. It seems like there's got to be more than that.
Well, yeah, and we do have the professional element built into the contract documents 2 times a year for the 8 years of the warranty. I think one of the largest issues associated with the existing field is the fact that the first generation of infill synthetic turf fields did not have UV inhibitors in the fibers.
Yeah, I noticed because I play on it all the time myself. As an adult, it's flat. It's just like
it's flat. Yeah, the structural integrity of those fibers has improved. The durability of the fibers has improved. But one of the big things is, the sun ate away at that field. And so a few things with newer technology in field synthetic turf, they have UV inhibitors in them, and they also have heat reflective technology in them as well. It's probably a bad analogy, but when I was a kid and I would sit in my parents' car in the middle of the summer wearing shorts, I'd burn the back of my back of my legs on the seat, right? I do that now, sit in my car, and it's fine. It's because the fibers in your car, whether it's leather or fake leather or whatever it is, they have heat reflective technology in them. It's the same as this. The UV inhibitors in here will protect the field from solar rays. Over time, it still takes its toll on it. But I think that's what will give you a longer lasting field.
And could you, just a little thought, could you say that basically because the sort of degradation of this field may have been actually accelerated due to the fact that it was overused? I mean,
that is definitely a possibility. I mean, that field was our only workhorse.
But it's lasted. It has been maintained.
Yeah, no, it's been maintained. It's been maintained. It's been a good soldier. Now it's time to give it some rest.
It's been 13 years, right? 13?
16.
16.
We're going to be 16 in long.
And it has been maintained.
yeah, I don't have the exact facts.
Yeah.
It seems like, but what I was trying to get at was because it is the only one.
Yeah.
It hadn't been overused.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're built for. They're built for a use nonstop. I mean, you could do it 24/7. But, like I said, I think it was, a combination of the UV and just a lot of use.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tommy Cuddy, I just want to add what Mike said. I want to thank Gary, everybody that's been involved, Maura, for this project. I was on project with Dan, and you know,
Right,
we've been
Tommy.
kicking this around for a long time. My kids played on Central, and they're 35. I want to thank you for the youth of Scituate and the student athlete of Scituate. So this project needs to be passed so they're not embarrassed rather than proud of their field, is all I can say. They've been playing on it for 30 years. I played football on that one at Central. You know, it's just, thank you very much. And please talk to your neighbors, get them out to vote. This is for the kids. This isn't for anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple other people I'd like to acknowledge. Tony Vignani, John Danahy, thank you for coming tonight. And also Superintendent Griffin, thank you.
Videographer.
Seth, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes.
I just think your presentation was so comprehensive. I wasn't planning to come this evening. I kind of came along with my husband, and I'm really glad that I did. I didn't really have any questions in my mind. I'm pro the project, but you really got to seal the deal. And I think we really need to move forward. I mean,
Yeah, we collectively put in a lot of hours on this. And,
thank you. Thank you all.
Maura and Bill and the rest of the Recreation Committee, you know, have really worked hard on this behind the scenes.
This is phenomenal. It's arguably the best project presentation this town's probably ever seen in its depth and its thoughtfulness. But we know how town meetings go, right? I mean, people have to get out and support if they want this passed. And I think one of the important things is, and it's why I brought up the funding aspect, is taxpayers need to understand that this project is funded so differently than every other need in town. That it's, yes, let's say 2 million to be round, is coming from the town. But the rest of it isn't an added tax burden.
Zero.
It's not free money because we've all paid into the fund, but the fund has to be used. And this project is in the sweet spot of why that fund has been created. It's not going to fix groundwater. It's not going to fix the back of Pier 44. It's not going to fix Hadley School. CPC can't do any of that.
That is correct.
Let's use the money properly and fund this project.
One other thing about that, Mike, so this, at town meeting, this is in 2 separate articles, so people cannot get up and leave after the first one's been voted on. CPC's later on in the meeting. We need everybody to stay throughout the entire meeting so that this gets passed through.
Actually, you got to stay to the end.
Yeah.
Because they can bring it, someone can bring it back.
Correct. Yeah. We can have Miss Facebook stand up and make a motion. You know, her investigative I-team get up and say something. So we need this. We need everybody to stay and make sure that this gets passed. Because if it doesn't, I don't know when this is ever going to come back around again. We will have everything come together the way that it is right now. And everybody, just so you guys know, everybody's in favor of this project and supports it. We have some yard signs back here in the back that are for everyone to take with them if they would like to and put in their yard if you want to support that. It's just a good way to show, hey, I'm part of this, I'm a member of the community, and this needs to go through. So feel free to take a sign with you as you leave. That's why they're here. And we honestly appreciate everybody coming out and learning more about this, actually getting some of the facts about it that are appropriate, and hope that everybody can come back out Monday night to town meeting and really get this thing pushed over across the goal line.
I would also want to talk about social media. People have made comments about things not being on social media and things being put on social media. My name is Jennifer McMillan. I posted things on social media and I've turned up comment day. I've been told I've been called a shrill and many other things. As a commissioner member, we took oath of ethics, and we are not allowed to post on social media to sway any type of a vote. So we, as a committee, are not allowed to post certain things on Facebook that would be perceived as swaying a vote. Anybody else in this room who's not on a committee or an elected official is more than welcome to go ahead and do that. But we can't post things that aren't, straight facts. I kept posting the link to this meeting, I kept posting the ethics thing. If I hadn't taken that oath, I would be more than happy to post things, but I take the oath seriously and I take my responsibilities to the Recreation Commission seriously, and I did not want to do anything to jeopardize that. And if anybody in this room has an issue with that, then I'm sorry. And if anybody in this room wants to put things on Facebook to sway people to vote in favor of it, please do.
You have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation?
I posted it on Facebook, actually. It's right on, you can go on the Massachusetts government website, and it's under the ethics.
Oh, you want the PowerPoint?
Oh, that? We posted on the Recreation Commission website, we can post that on there.
Put it on Situate Monthly.
Yeah.
And also Seth is going to be posting the whole
Yes.
meeting on SCTV.
Will this be presented again Monday night at the meeting for people who did not come tonight?
Largely a abridged version.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
Can't take the whole
what?
town meeting over.
An abridged version.
Okay.
I believe.
Because it was very,
We
very
only get
well
like 10 minutes.
Very well
So,
done.
and it's a long night for everyone, so, it's really,
Yeah.
you have to be concise.
30 articles.
Yeah, except I think this is the biggest one, right, Tom? This is pretty much the biggest. I guess it depends on your opinion, right?
It is important to know, as Gary said, it's two parts. So if the one in the capital plan does not pass, then you can't do any of the turf aspects of the project. So, and that's, I think, the third article. So if you get that right, you may miss it. And know that the two go together.
I just have one more comment. Wasn't the football field, when it was put in a couple of years ago, or many years ago with the turf, a community field?
Yes.
So it's called a community field.
Yes.
So we, as a community, should be fixing the field.
Yes.
I think it's a great idea.
So the article is Article 3, which is capital planning, and then it's Article 12, the CPC fund. So there is a gap in between. And like Gary said, if you don't wait to the end, this has happened before, it can be brought back up to vote and actually re-voted. So it's important to stay.
You get to learn a lot about other things in town.
All right. Thank you, everyone.